And there we go. Good evening, everyone. I decided not to do any sort of an intro like I normally do on the morning show and just kind of welcome people to the show. How's it going, TikTok? So, I wasn't feeling up for doing a show tonight, but I remember that I promised that I would, that I need to do at least one a week. And there were definitely some stories that from the Daily Show and from the TikTok, I just can't actually explain what's happening, especially politically. But this venue allows me to do that. So before I get into all that, and I remind the people on TikTok, I would recommend switching to Twitch. I wanted to thank Evan, Dan, and Dan, who sent me some beer and coffee money that I appreciate. And if you listen to this and you would like to contribute to the show, I do not want to set up a Patreon. And so I figured I'd just put my Venmo if people wanted to send me $4 for a cup of coffee or a beer. And you can find all that in my link tree. But besides that, there were two stories today that I just wanted to quickly touch on. Or actually, one story from today, and the other is an ongoing saga over the week, which is basically Kim Janey's week, is how I'm defining it. But before we get to that, one story that I wanted to bring up, because I definitely talked about it. Oh, did it work? There it goes. Is the recent installment of what's going on at Mass and Cass with victory programs. Also, I recognize that some people don't like when I use the phrase Mass and Cass. If somebody, when I'm speaking to a left audience, wants to give me a better term, I'm more than happy to do that. However, when people are on the doors speaking about this politically to any, we'll say just normal person, and even that is a tough phrase, that is the term that local officials use, that the media uses. And so to be understood, to me, it still is a very useful term because everyone knows exactly what you're talking about. And to me, it doesn't stigmatize a marginalized population by addressing the street addresses of this location. But again, I'm open to, if people want to, give me another idea of to define it. I don't know if methadone mile is more PC or not. But anyway, I've talked about this before, but Victory Programs, a nonprofit, was going to rent out space in a local hotel in that area, which is, I have to imagine, mostly abandoned, and provide treatment housing in a housing first model from anywhere from 14 to 35 people. And what a housing first model means is exactly as it is described, is that you want to address issues of homelessness, substance abuse. The most successful, and you can measure that in terms of how effective it is in keeping people from returning to the streets, again, quote unquote, to the streets, how effective it is at preventing deaths, how effective it is in a cost manner. The most effective program is to simply give housing to people who need it, and then while they are there, offer them treatment and services if they would like to make themselves available to it. The reason that a lot of people avoid some of the state-run, city-run, other nonprofit-run, other church-run housing models is because they come with restrictions. They say you can stay here, but you must do X, Y, or Z. You can stay here, but you must submit to this inspection. You can stay here, but you can't drink. And for a lot of people, and that includes people listening to this, you value autonomy, your freedom, your ability to exist without being infantilized. And that is why people avoid it. Especially someone dealing with substance abuse, if you say to them, you can stay here, but you can't use that substance, which you are right now needing to get through your day, then they're not going to take advantage of that model. A housing first model, again, is the most effective way. And that is what, to my understanding, is the model that Victory Programs uses. And this faced fierce opposition from the local community. I think it is a direct group there. I don't want to mislabel it, so I'm scanning now. But we'll say a local community group in the South End, which rallied against this measure. Very easy then for local politicians like Ed Flynn, like Michael Flaherty, like Frank Baker, like Dr. John Santiago, failed mayoral candidate. Again, being a doctor and being against what is the most proven treatment model is disgusting. Failed candidate. To go into what these groups feared, which was the South End Forum neighborhood group, Steve Fox. I don't know who that is. I guess quoting now, neighbors in neighborhoods abutting Mass and Cass are delighted. VPI has chosen to seek alternative locations for this important program. Okay. The reason that, again, people who live in this community do not want this model is because they fear that all the abandoned units will eventually be occupied with people who need the service. Now, why is that the primary fear? I do not know directly, because right now, the largest complaint from the people in this community is that there are too many people with substance abuse who are homeless who are congregating in this area. And they say the reason they're congregating is because that is where some of the services are provided. So they are saying, no, we don't want any more services here. We want you to spread them out. And so they are fighting any new services from coming in, right? What this group is failing to understand, failing to wrestle with the reality that they're being presented, is that no community in Boston is going to want these services in their location. There is not a single neighborhood in Boston which is going to say, "Oh, Victory Programs, they didn't want your units. Come on down. You can have temporary housing here." These programs will be met with not just the same resistance that you did to this program, but even greater resistance, because there are a lot of neighborhoods and communities of Boston that have a lot more resources, capital, and political clout to fight against this program than you do. And so if the option is between doing nothing, providing no housing, and then allowing people to stay on the streets, you are choosing the latter. I understand that every local politician right now is telling you that they are going to decentralize services. For that to occur, again, it is going to face incredible opposition all over the city. The people are there now. And if you want the people to no longer be on the streets, to no longer be stepping on needles, then you need to embrace models that work. And to kick out this program, which would have been successful, is only going to exacerbate and make worse the situation that you're finding yourselves in. And local politicians don't have the heart to tell you that. They'll lie and keep telling you, "Oh, well, we'll decentralize. We'll put these all over the community." They're lying to you. It's not going to happen. And if it does, it is a long way away. And so to continue to allow the level of suffering which is happening because of an innate fear, because of false promises from your local officials, is wrong. Happy to have a larger conversation if anyone from that group would like to speak to me. But let's get to the second part. See if this part doesn't get me in trouble. So there is a number of stories. Actually, hold on. I got a quick question from the TikTok audience. Have you heard the ban on high-end gaming computers in California? Do you think it will happen in MA? I have not heard about that. I would love more information if you can DM me. That's pretty funny. I know part of it, I'm sure, has to do with either the shortage of microchips that is just all over the place. We can't even build new cars right now because of it. Or maybe second, when they say high-end computers, it's kind of like a bank shot to cut down on Bitcoin mining or cryptocurrency mining. But I would need to look more into it. You can send it to me. Do I think it's going to happen here in Massachusetts? Probably not. So Kim Janey had, I guess there are three big stories this week, and I could only touch on them briefly, and I think they deserve a little bit more of a political analysis, which is maybe the only thing that I'm good for here. So let's go with one of the more recent ones first, and that is the comments that Kim Janey made yesterday involving equating a vaccination mandate to slavery. And she already walked this back. She walked this back, I think, earlier today. So there's no reason that I need to discuss why that was a very damaging and why that was a very horrible analogy. I think everyone understands that universally. Again, Kim Janey walked it back. I'm a little concerned politically that her team had to anticipate that she would be asked that at some point, and either one, they did not review talking points ahead of time, which is kind of a failure on that part, or two, and this is the worst case scenario, they did review talking points and it resulted in just compare it to slavery. So, I mean, the latter is worse, but I don't think either of those are pretty good. It sounded to me like she got caught off guard. But why I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this is because the reason, in my estimation, that Kim Janey is against, at least at this point, a vaccine mandate like what's happening in New York City right now is because she wants to not have the same problem that she had when they decided to accelerate the timeline of workers returning to City Hall. Because, and this was, again, months ago, when Charlie Baker just said, F it, let's be legends, and bumped up Massachusetts' reopening from like August 1st to the end of May or whenever it was, Kim Janey followed suit in Boston. And then she decided to also follow suit, also move up that timetable for city employees must return to work on X day. And her big failure in that politically, which it didn't seem like they consulted anyone. They didn't seem like they consulted the union. They didn't consult the workers ahead of time. And so she faced a lot of blowback from that, had to walk it back. Again, comically, I think it was SEIU 888 threatened to sue her administration. A month or two later, they endorsed her. So I think part of it, and the reason she doesn't want to come out right now for a vaccine mandate, is that she wants to make sure that she is having a longer conversation with the unions that endorsed her to make sure that they feel part of the process. The second is that the unions themselves do not want a vaccine mandate. They do not want their workers to be compelled to do something for their employment. And as a union, they are representing that element. Now, I think that is short-sighted. I think that is dangerous from a public health perspective, but that is the function of the union. And now Kim Janey is trying to, stay in conversation with, trying to placate might be the right word, those unions that have supported her, other workers that have supported her. I'm sure there is another political calculation of there's going to be a certain population which resents me for mandating this vaccine, and those are going to be lost votes, right? Especially from maybe some conservative white men who have not yet received the vaccine. Though I believe the figures, white men probably are the second or third highest category in terms of racial and gender demographics here in Boston to get it. But I'm sure we got some Trump people who are against it, right? So these are the political considerations that Kim is facing about a vaccine mandate. So her way of expressing it was absolutely horrible and damaging. So I wanted to just spend a quick couple seconds on that. All right, now for one of the big ones. So earlier this week, the Right to the City Vote Coalition, which I have, we'll say, been a member of 2 years ago during the municipal cycles. Boston DSA was a part of their endorsement process. Very honored to be a part of that. A coalition of community groups which advocate for communities of color came out and endorsed Kim Janey. Again, some of these groups comprise of the Reclaim Roxbury, the Jamaica Plain Progressives may have. I mean, they work in coalition with them. Chinese Progressive Association. Again, a lot of fantastic organizations that do a lot of great work in their community. They came out and endorsed Kim Janey. And if you're listening to this, I'm sure you also know that I have endorsed and support Michelle Wu. Now, I know internally that there was debate over this. There were debates over every endorsement, and they decided to go with Kim Janey. And now, politically, again, like sometimes Twitter like blows up about things like this. Ultimately, you can simultaneously have a lot of love and respect for an organization and disagree with their endorsement. That doesn't mean that you now view those organizations as sellouts or anything like that. So people who talk like that, especially around these organizations and coalition, really don't know what they're talking about. The primary consideration that people need to take into account when you are looking at an endorsement vote from an organization is that their, we'll call it rubric, probably doesn't match yours. Because every organization has to weigh maintaining an influence with the next administration. That is a consideration I don't have to have. I do not care, one way or another, if I have zero access to Michelle Wu if she isn't mayor, or Andrea Campbell, or Kim Janey, or Annissa Essaibi-George. That has nothing to do with how I operate politically in Massachusetts or in Boston. I do not need to weigh that as part of my political calculation. Organizations that in some part might depend on city funding, might depend on access to those politicians, do have to weigh who has the best chance of winning and use that as part of their formula. And that is okay. That is realistic. That is what they're supposed to do. We'll draw this to somebody else. Annissa Essaibi-George received the endorsement of the Massachusetts Nurses Association. There is absolutely zero policy reasons why that would happen. Annissa Essaibi-George does not have a single policy which would be more beneficial than nurses. In fact, a lot of her policies would probably be damaging to nurses who live in the city. I'm talking about housing and transportation. But that was not part of their political calculus. Part of their political calculus probably had to do with relationships. It probably had to do with maybe they thought she was the best bet to win. In my mind, it's more the relationships. And I'm sure that played a dynamic inside of the Right to the City Vote Coalition as well. People have relationships with Kim Janey. They believe that if she succeeds, then their issues will be heard more. They're going to have a much stronger seat at the table. That Kim Janey has the best chance of winning, which I agree with. I think that is absolutely true. And so why go against that when you can build a coalition, maybe push her to the left on some topics, which it appears that they may have successfully done. But I wanted people to understand those dynamics when you're looking at how an organization votes. You also look at how the decision was reached. Is it kind of like the board, the leadership of the different communities, of the different groups come together and they vote? Do they send it back to their membership and their membership votes? So on and so forth. These are all ways of how you determine and look at an endorsement. And the third and final story. Hello, Boston chick, baby. The third and final story with Kim Janey that I wanted to talk about has to do with the issue of rent control. And comically, if you're watching on the Twitch, the Facebook, the YouTube, that picture description at the bottom, you can't see this on TikTok, but it's Kim Janey, it's Michelle Wu, then underneath it says photo of. They had to update this because originally when they aired this, it said Kim Janey and Janet Wu. And so whoever did the captions did not know Michelle's first name. Which is funny in one way. It's also, this has been like a trend in some Boston media of saying like, there are two Woos. Like, how are we going to keep track? It's like, dude, there's like 27 Dans in the Massachusetts State House. But anyway, so the title of this episode is some play on Janet, and that's the reason. But as I said before, part of, and again, I'm not speaking from insider knowledge. I'm sure part of the Right to the City Vote coalition strategy is we can move Kim Janey left on some issues. And it appears one of those issues may be the topic of rent control. Maybe. I'm adding a lot of qualifiers to this. Because as of a week ago, Michelle Wu, and this is still true today, so might just take me a second. Michelle Wu was the only person, if you asked anyone in Boston politics, who supports rent control for Boston, it would have been Michelle Wu and no one else. That was 100%. That has been backed up by forum after forum. I've covered them here on this program. Every candidate has raised a little red card and said no on the issue of rent control except for Michelle Wu. Along with the Right to the City Vote endorsement, Kim Janey changed her website. Maybe I can quickly bring it up, which makes it look like she is maybe up to it. I want to read the actual specific language of it because it is so laborsome and so convoluted that it is like the most tongue-twisted pretzel way of getting to it. Let's see. No, I don't even see it here. It's, okay, I found it. All right. This is why quoting now. This is why I am supportive of efforts to implement community stabilization strategies that will increase cost certainty for our city's tenants. And I do believe local control is important on all issues, so I support state legislation that would allow cities and towns to decide for themselves how to control rising housing costs. Those are the two sentences that she added that people are pointing to and saying, look, she supports rent control now. Now, I am sorry, and for the people in the TikTok, right now, the reason I'm looking up, the reason I have this massive mic is because I broadcast this on Twitch, on YouTube. I would recommend switching to Twitch so you can see the articles that I'm reading. I'll read it again, and somebody stop me if you think you hear the words rent control. This is why I am supportive of efforts to implement community stabilization strategies that will increase cost certainty for our city's tenants. And I do believe local control is important on all issues, so I support state legislation that would allow cities and towns to decide for themselves how to control rising housing costs. Now, the first sentence, that is such a stretch to say that explicitly recommends rent control. That, to me, in intellectual good faith, I don't think you can make. Now, the second part, and this is, to me, is the most important, I think this is the clarifying issue about allowing local control. Because right now, as of 1994 with the ballot initiative, Massachusetts, no city in Massachusetts can pass their own rent control. It was banned throughout the entire state. I think there are 3 cities that had it in 1994. I think it was Boston, Cambridge, maybe one other. Though people who lived in those cities overwhelmingly supported to keep it, people in the surrounding communities, in rural communities, suburban communities, they voted to kill it. So for Boston to pass rent control, we would need either a new statewide law, a new statewide ballot initiative, or maybe a home rule petition to the State House which says, let us be exempt, let us decide rent control for ourselves. And that is what, for that second sentence, it looks like Kim Janey is saying that she would support. So I think the best way to answer this riddle, even though, again, there was a horrible piece about this. I wish I didn't say horrible, because after you read it, the title is bad. Rent control, not a clear-cut divide. Janey and Wu hold similar positions on the issue, which they absolutely do not. But from my read of it, Kim Janey will not come out publicly and say she supports rent control because she thinks it will hurt her politically. However, she will say, I will not stand in the way, and in fact, I support a home rule petition which lets us decide that for ourselves. Now, to get a home rule petition passed, it's not enough to be, I won't stand in the way of it. You're going to have to fight for that because no one in the State House is going to want us to have it. The state representatives who represent parts of Boston are against it. And so you need someone who's going to be very, very strong and fierce on this issue. And Michelle Wu has proven that time and time again, that she is vocal, she is a strong advocate of it. But I think the best way, again, to judge it is Kim Janey is maybe behind closed doors okay with it, will not come out publicly. And if a politician won't come out publicly and say something, then you have to tag that and you have to hold them to that, basically saying if you don't say it publicly, then you don't believe it. But she will be okay with a home rule petition on rent control, which for me is not good enough where it comes to the issue of does someone support rent control, yes or no. But this is my read of it. This is the week of internal debates over what is happening and who believes what. So I'm going to leave you all with that. I figured 30 minutes. I'm at 28. That's perfect. I want to say thank you again to Evan, Dan, and Dan for Venmoing me a cup of coffee and a beer. If you like the show, like, subscribe, retweet, do all of the things that you would normally do. I'm going to say goodbye to the live